Okay, so I wanted to show you a few additional steps. The first video of the Photoshop intro should take you through the basics of starting to get your document set up, and start building a collage or composite. But there's some more refined, advanced techniques that in a college level class you should be exploring. And so it's really helpful to do these, to already have some pieces already built in and maybe some pictures that you want to bring over. And so I'm going to work on maybe moving one of these buildings over. 10-2 has been nice enough to let me borrow her composite, but I won't save it because I don't want to mess it up. So the video, the first Photoshop intro video, shows you a basic introduction to cutting and pasting, compositing. It's a style of editing called destructive editing, where you select what you want and then remove it from the rest of the data. For plenty of things, this kind of editing is just fine, but as you get more well-versed in Photoshop and as you start to use these tools more, it is more sophisticated and more professional to use what's called non-destructive editing, where you're not actually destroying or deleting any pixels. And so how you would do that, you can certainly use your selection tools, but for non-destructive editing, I like to draw a looser selection. So say if I just wanted to get this building, I can use the lasso tool, which you were shown how to use in one of the last videos, and just get a loose selection. I can also then use, at this point, something called a quick mask. So once you have your selection already drawn with any of the selection tools, you hit the Q key on your keyboard, and it immediately turns everything that's not selected red. It's showing you that because you can actually now use your paintbrush, and with painting with just black and white, so you click on these little icons so that you load the default black and default white. Painting with black, it will paint out parts of it, and so I can refine this a little bit more. I'm still doing destructive editing with this process because once I'm done, I can still remove it from everything else. You can also use a paintbrush, so I can right-click and get a larger paintbrush. If there are pieces that you accidentally, say I accidentally take out the tip of this building, I want to put it back in, I just use my arrow. See here, you use the arrow to flip to white, and then I can paint and put that selection back in. And you'll notice when you hit the Q key again, it will move your selection based on where you're painting. So to show you that a little stronger, if I paint into here, and then I hit Q again, it's going to move that selection. So it just helps me get a little bit closer to what I want, helps me get rid of things that I definitely don't want. And you'll notice that the other selection tools definitely do not give you as much control as this one does. So you can use the quick select tool to get it a little closer. And then for this, I'm not even going to refine it because I'm really going to be doing the refinement by hand. So I'm going to take my selection tool, I'm going to move this building over as you were shown in the previous video, and perfect, it's a layer sandwich here, so it popped in right above my background building here and right on top. Remember the video, the last video shows you then, you know, if your picture is not in the right spot or right position, then you can move it up or down in your layer order. And it's kind of like a sandwich that you're looking down on. So this very top layer is the layer closest to you. The very bottom layer is the farthest back from you. So then I could drag this layer in between right where I want it. So now I'll get it sized up to, you know, about a realistic position, put it where I want it. And so now you see I did bring it over here, but now there's all these white parts from the sky that were behind it. If I just go and erase it, that's doing destructive editing. It's really not considered proper Photoshop usage for people who know what they're doing. So what you want to do in this case is add a layer mask. A layer mask happens down in the layer palette, so you want to be selected on the correct layer that you want to mask. And then you're going to hit this button down at the bottom of the layer palette. If you mouse over it, it'll say Add Layer Mask. It's a white square with a dark circle in the middle. And when I click on that button, you'll notice now it's added a different icon to my layer 4. I can still click on the photo icon and be able to move it, scale it. I'm holding down shift when I scale it so I don't distort the proportions like the last video showed you. So I'm going to put it right here because there's a piece cut off. There was a car there, so I couldn't really, get rid of that any better. So I'm just going to tuck it right here. But I can go over to my icon for the layer mask, and again, I'm going to be painting with black and white, and painting with my paintbrush with black will mask out what's there. The cool thing is that it's not actually deleting it. And for doing a composite like this is really the smart way to go about it, because say later I put in another building and I get this all just where I want it, but I decide I need to move it over slightly, and moving it over, well, I just deleted a big chunk out of it. If that's the case, then you have to go back and start over. But so say I'm erasing all of this and later I decide, oh wait, I kind of like that tree. I had another picture with a tree that blended there perfectly. Well, if I had erased it, it's gone. Those pixels are deleted. I have to go back to the original picture, pull it over and start over. But if I've used a mask, I just go back to my mask, flip to paint in white, and when you paint in white, it's all still there. So this is the professional way of masking and editing in Photoshop for sure, using the layer mask itself. Also notice when you bring all of your different pieces in, they'll come over in your layers palette as a bunch of different layers. Each image you bring over or open up and place into your Photoshop document will come in as its own layer. You can also do what Tantu's done here and organize layers. How you do that is you can hold down your option key and select the layers that you want to group, and then you come up to your layers palette and you choose the little option here and you say new group from layers, and then I could call it, skyline or something like that, and put everything to do with those layers all together. Another benefit of that is that then when I'm moving them around, I can just click on the layer itself or the group itself and move the whole thing. See, because these two red lanterns are inside of here, so they move as a group. So it's just a quicker way of organizing, and you don't end up with 20 different layers. You can name your layers by clicking, double-clicking on the names, or right-clicking and choose, where is it? Over here. Name layer. Nope, you have to click once and then click twice in the, it's not letting me do it. There we go. Then you can name your layers. You just double click where the little name is. It'll say like layer 1, background, this and that. If you have a layer that's all set up and you don't want to mess with it, I think the other video showed you, but you can click on this and click on that layer and then hit the padlock to lock that layer. That way it won't accidentally let you put anything in there or paint or do anything in there at all. So you've got that. I also wanted to show you some of the image adjustments. You'll learn a little bit more about that with the next process, but there's all kinds of things that you can do, once you have them together. And because we're making composites, it doesn't always work to make them look like they're all on the same plane together. Sometimes, you'll have a building that was at a different angle or photographed at a different angle and it just doesn't look right. So what you can do is, again, I'm going to work on this building here. I can find out what layer that is a little easier. I can right click and it'll tell me every layer I'm right clicked over. I think I'm going to move this out of the group. There we go, so I can find it easier. So once you go into a layer, you can go to Edit, Transform, and in here you have lots of different options for transforming, scaling, moving, rotating your pictures. And so you can either click on them this way, so I can go to scale. I always hold down shift when I scale so it keeps in proportion unless I want to distort it. Photoshop will let you do some distorting, and you'll notice while you're scaling them, they'll look really pixelated. It's because it's a live animation. But once I double click on it, then you see I can zoom in and it looks fine again. But when you start to distort your pixels too much, what you'll see start to happen is that they get stacked on top of each other and they just don't look right after a while. So you have to be careful how far you stretch in one direction or another. Or, like I said, just always hold down shift when you're scaling, and then you'll keep it in proportion. Under transform, you can also rotate, so you can get things at a different angle. You can skew them, skew, and the other ones. And once you're in one of them, you can just right click and get to all the rest of them. It's just a quick contextual menu. So skew, distort, and perspective, and also warp can really help to get it looking like it really actually belonged there. You know, so maybe for this one, I just need it to look like it's getting a little smaller as it goes away from me. So I can do that. So you just play around with them to kind of see what they do. Here's distort. You can grab different pieces. Perspective can help you, like if something is on an angled wall and you want to put a different picture on a billboard, perspective can really help you look like it's angling toward or away from you. And then the last one, warp, puts your image on a grid and lets you actually warp and distort it. So if you're trying to get something to fit into a space that it's kind of not that shape, you can warp it a little bit and get it to fit in that shape. And then when you're done, you double click on it, or anytime you see this check mark and circle slash at the top, you've got to either commit to the change or cancel the change before it'll let you move forward. So then I've got that one, and I can still go in and clean it up and get it all nice and clean. Gotta make sure I'm painting with black or else it won't work. To mask out some of it. And you can use a bigger brush too if you have a larger area. You can just go in with a bigger brush. Okay. If you are running into any kind of visual where they don't look right together, like, you know, looking at this one, I see this building here, it was shot in the daytime, and the rest of it was shot at night, so it doesn't quite look the same. What you can do is you can go to that layer and then go to image adjustments, and this is where you have access to all the different kinds of adjustments. Brightness and contrast, I don't actually use that at all anymore because this next one, levels, is even better. Levels puts every pixel on a graph and allows you to use these sliders to control your darks, your mediums, and your lights. But notice it's only doing this to this one layer. So I can adjust the levels so that it kind of has more of that vibrant night look to it than a sunshiny day look. So see, just with a little bit of levels. One of the best tricks with this kind of stuff is there's almost always a preview button. So uncheck the preview and see, how did it look before? How does it look now? Yeah, I like it. It looks a little more like it's nighttime. Okay, so that's under edit or image adjustments. You do levels. Curves allows you to play with the colors on the curves. So if you need to change or alter the colors a little bit, again, maybe it was taken, you know, too much during the day, so I want to go in and drop out the blues a little bit, I can do that. Then there's also hue and saturation, and those of you who were in the MGD 102 class last semester got an introduction to these as well. So these are the same kind of tools that we used for editing your scanograms. So you can go into hue and saturation, say the color's just off, you can adjust the color a little bit. You can colorize it and adjust the color a lot. The saturation, right, how rich the color is, how light or dark it is. So you can really manipulate these to start making them look like they go together. That's that whole composite trick. And one more little trick over in your layers, and then I'm just going to show you how to add text. So over in your layers, there are all kinds of things that you can do with your layers as well. So you'll notice when you click on your layers, you'll see opacity. You can lower the opacity and start to see one thing through another. When you have your opacity down, you can also use these layer styles, and it'll give you really different looks. Let me go back onto my building here so you can see. So it'll give you really different looks depending on what layers you have and what opacity you have. I'm trying to find this one. There we go. And I just encourage you to play with these because they don't always work for everything, you know, but maybe if there was something on the water, I'd want it to look dissolved. Sometimes what this does is it just helps kind of push the layers together more or help separate them more depending on what the setting is. And like I said, every 2 layers that you put together with different opacities are going to look different. So you just have to experiment with them and see if there's one that gives you a better look. But very often when you're compositing, you can use these to help it look like it really belonged there instead of standing out. For this, none of these really work, so I'm just going to leave it to normal. But you never know until you try, right? Right? Right. Excuse me. So because we are going to make tourist posters, you might want to be adding text to these, right? Very often tourist posters have, you know, come to this place. Photoshop has a text tool. It's on the left-hand side in your tools. It's a big T. And you grab it and you click anywhere in your document where you want to add text. And then you'll see up at the top in your control palette, you've got all kinds of fonts here, and you can see what they look like. You can adjust your size, your sharpness, your orientation. There's some curves and things. Now here's one thing that always trips us up. I usually do my text in Illustrator, so every time I do it in Photoshop, I get confused. You can set whatever color you want in your foreground color, but most of the time, oh, it does it now. Most of the time, it does not affect your text color. So most of the time, you know, what we'll do is we'll get some perfect color all set up, like, yes, that's the perfect color I want, and then you'll go to your text tool, and it'll be some different color. It's because your text color is up here on your control palette, so you click to it, go there, and then say, you know, come to Vietnam. You notice it came a little small. I can select it, change the size. I can type in a number here so I can make it even bigger. You can put returns in there to put some space in there. And notice, does anybody know why my text just disappeared partially? Yeah, because of the layers. So all I'd have to do to make sure it shows up on top of everything is just grab it and drag it to the top of my layers palette. Oh, and now I put it in the red lantern group, so now it's grouped with the red lantern. So it puts your text in its own layer. I can put it on top of everything. One thing when you're adding text on top of imagery is you have to be careful to make it readable. You know, is this very readable? Not really. So what I can do is double click next to the name on the layer, and then you get these layer styles. You can actually do these to any layers. So if you want to create a shadow under a layer or a glow under one of your pictures, you can. But I find these very useful. And so what you do to try the layer styles, if you just click on the box itself, it will not let you see the settings. So you actually want to click on the words and then it'll turn it on. So you have bevel and emboss, which gives you 3-dimensional text. Stroke gives you an outline around your text. And see, once you go to it, you can change the color to any color. So you can make it something bright. You can make it thicker. So all of them, they have settings. If you just keep clicking on all of them, it'll turn them all on. So be careful. There's an inner shadow, an outer glow. Outer glow can look great if there is, you know, a lot of dark things around your text. You can give it, oh, that's the inner glow. I prefer the outer glow. Satin gives it some texture. Cover overlay will change the color. Gradient overlay, you can put a gradient on top of your text. Pattern overlay, you could even add a pattern on top of your text. So, you know, depending on your location, maybe you're doing somewhere really fun and some fun wild text totally makes sense. The outer glow, I find, is a really nice one for helping text kind of pop off the page. And you can do yellow, you can do any color, you can do a gradient in here. So notice when you get to these, just play with the settings and see what they do. I find this quality one's weird because it pulls it off of the edge, but if you like that effect, it's something, you know, maybe it looks like neon lights or something like that. So you can play around with those. And then there's also a drop shadow. which can help give you the illusion that something is really there in that world. So I encourage you to use these with your text, or you need to leave an open space for your text. But see, I kind of think this goes because there's glowing lights behind it. It kind of looks like a neon sign where it's glowing. I might, move it somewhere not so weird. So are there any questions on those few basics? And this will be available as a video for you to review. So if there's no questions, I'm going to stop recording.